Hello government students, it's Mr. Stanton speaking to you from inside this video. Today I'd like to talk to you about forms of government around the world. Now, we all know that you're in an American government class, but one of the best ways to understand your own government is to look at other types of government around the world. Now, take a look at this map from Wikipedia. Each color represents a different form of government. Is there anything that surprises you about the different colors here? Take a look at us. The United States is in this blue, and so is most of Latin America, a lot of Africa, and countries in Central Asia, even including Iran and Afghanistan. Now, how could that be? How could all these different countries all have the same basic form of government, even these Islamic countries with Islamic laws that are a whole lot different from the laws we have in the United States? Well, think about what we've learned recently about U.S. government. We have separation of powers so that the different jobs of government are split between different government bodies or different branches. We have the legislative branch that makes the laws, the judicial branch that interprets the laws, and the executive branch, headed by our president, that executes the laws. It turns out that even though they may be a lot different in the sorts of laws or leaders they have, all these other blue countries also have presidential systems where they have a separation of powers and a president in charge. So in blue, these are presidential systems with a separation of powers. Not every country in the world has that kind of system, as we'll see. Take a look at our neighbor, Canada. Is there a president of Canada or a president of the United Kingdom? Heck no, there never has been and may never be. Instead, these countries have what's called a parliamentary system. So they have a parliament, which is their legislative branch, but instead of having a separation of powers, these countries have a fusion of powers. The powers of government are almost all or entirely fused into the parliament or the legislative branch, and the leader of the country is selected from inside of the parliament. And usually that's called a prime minister. So you have the Prime Minister of Canada, Stephen Harper, and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, David Cameron, and so on. These men are the executives, the leaders of the country, but they come out of the legislative branch. They're not separate. So there's a fusion of powers in these parliamentary countries. Now, these orange countries, they're also parliamentary systems. Same with the green. They're just colored differently on the map because there are slight differences. All these parliamentary systems, instead of separating out their powers, they're fused into one elected body, usually called a parliament. Sometimes it goes by different names, but it's that same idea. Fuse the powers and select your leader out of that one government body. Quite different from what we have in the United States. Even though we may have very similar freedoms and ideas to Canada, their government form is quite different. Now, the last form of government I'd like to talk with you about with you today is these yellow countries. Look, there's Russia, there's France, and several other countries across the world. If they're not a presidential system and they're not a parliamentary system, what are they? Well, it turns out they're a combination of both. Now, think about who's the president of Russia. It's Vladimir Putin, right? Well, for all these years that he's been in power in Russia, he hasn't always been president. For several years in there, Vladimir Putin was the prime minister of Russia. That's right, in these yellow countries there's both a president and a prime minister. It's a combination of the presidential and parliamentary systems, so it's called semi-presidential. These countries in yellow decided that they liked the idea of having a separate executive with the president in charge, but then they also liked the idea of fusing powers into a parliament with a prime minister in charge. So they have both. So these three forms of government are all based on separate ideas about how you should separate out powers or fuse them together or have some sort of mixed system with a combination of tactics. Your assignment for today is to choose any country in the world. Any of these countries on this map, regardless of their color, besides the United States, which we're studying all the time. Choose that country and then research it. And then write up some explanation of what their form of government is. Likely it's going to be one of these three forms, but it could be a different form of government. So research that country, find out what its form of government is, and then list 5 differences between that country's form of government and our form of government in the United States. Even if you choose a country that also has a presidential system, there are definitely going to be differences.